In this video we follow the inspiring journey of Caroline Walker, a disregarded cleaning lady who shocks the entire company when she reveals that she's the largest shareholder. Through this story, Nancy not only cleans the office but also transforms the entire company culture, delivering a powerful message about respect and perseverance. If you find this story interesting and meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more inspiring stories. Thank you for watching. When Caroline Walker, wearing her old uniform and faded red shirt, pushed her cleaning cart through the shiny doors of Circle Industries, one of the most powerful corporations in New York, with her hair tied back, head bowed, and hands calloused from years of hard labor, she became invisible to the managers and employees who were rushing around in their expensive suits. They passed her without saying hello or even looking at her. The entire building was bustling with activity as directors and employees hurried to meeting rooms in preparation for crucial meetings. Caroline's shoes made gentle noises on the immaculately polished floors as she moved through the shining corridors. Despite being old and faded over time, the red shirt she wore stood out among the building's opulent surroundings, but nobody paid any attention to it. Caroline was merely a part of the surroundings, whether it was the floors, tables, or chairs. She cleaned them every day and was responsible for clearing up any messes they left behind. Caroline Walker, the woman in the faded red shirt, had been employed at Circle Industries for many years and was familiar with every area of the building, from the opulent boardrooms on the top floor to the storage rooms where forgotten items were left behind. She silently watched the powerful people go by every day, but none of them bothered to look at her because they were too preoccupied with their meetings and important decisions. Caroline just went about her work quietly and diligently, but no one knew that she was more than just a cleaning lady. She was aware of how they behaved, made decisions, and treated one another, and she knew that everything would soon change drastically. That Tuesday morning seemed like any other. Before the crucial meeting, Caroline went into the spacious boardroom on the upper floor to tidy up. One of the haughty senior managers, Greg Summers, entered the room with his co-workers after noticing Caroline washing the windows. Greg took advantage of the opportunity to make fun of her, saying, "Make sure you clean thoroughly, Caroline." He sneered, "Some of us have a very important meeting here, so don't ruin our morning with any smudges." Greg dismissed Caroline with a tone full of contempt, as though she wasn't worthy of his attention, without even looking at her. They didn't realize that their remarks weren't just hurtful, but also marked a huge mistake they would soon pay for. Caroline continued cleaning the window with her calloused hands, her eyes calm despite Greg's sneers in her heart. Over the years at Circle Industries, she had grown accustomed to such words. Greg's co-workers erupted in laughter, praising his cruel humor, telling them that Caroline was just a cleaner. She always kept a low profile as though nothing could shake her, but deep down Caroline remembered everything. David Harris, another senior manager at Circle, was notorious for his haughty demeanor and conceited nature. To him, Caroline was just a part of the building like the glass walls she cleaned a tool. Caroline had seen the disdain of people like Greg, smug managers who saw themselves as the center of everything and never recognized the value of others. He felt entitled to look down on people in lower positions today because he was the center of attention and didn't deserve it. The words were delivered with a condescending glance and half-smile, making David's colleagues laugh heartily. They didn't care how Caroline felt because, to them, she was just a cleaner who never had a chance to speak up or fight back. On numerous other occasions he made a snide remark, "Snap, please this time don't leave any streaks, we've got a big meeting coming up, don't disturb us." Caroline simply nodded gently as if the words didn't touch her. She carried on with her work, using her deft hands to remove the dirt from the windows. This was merely a minor aspect of Caroline's everyday responsibilities, but her quiet wasn't a sign of weakness. Rather, it was the patience of a woman who had witnessed and experienced too much behind the glass door. While Caroline was cleaning, a group of other managers passed by, all preoccupied with their own tasks. They didn't bother to look at her because, in their eyes, she was just a part of the space that existed to clean up the mess they made. They frequently passed her without saying thank you or giving her a kind glance, and Caroline never complained. Instead, she carried on with her work in a quiet, professional manner, but her eyes were constantly watching. She had witnessed every action that managers like David took against their subordinates, taunting, demeaning, and occasionally abusing their position of authority to establish their superiority, but David and others were unaware that Caroline knew far more than they did. She was well versed in Circle Industries' shadowy areas, which the directors and staff never imagined a cleaner could comprehend, as evidenced by David's derisive laughter and his co-workers. Caroline remained silent like a ghost amidst Circle's shining surfaces as spiteful laughter reverberated throughout the room. but she knew deep down that the day she would be silenced was drawing near. David Harris had no idea that his contemptuous remarks would prove to be the greatest error of his career. In a short period of time, he would no longer be present at those crucial meetings or occupy the influential seats. His pride and haughtiness would be destroyed just as quickly as he had disregarded and made fun of Caroline because what David and his co-workers were unaware that Caroline Walker, the woman wearing the faded red shirt, was more than just a regular housekeeper. While David Harris's mocking laughter and his colleagues continued to echo in the opulent room, one person did not join in. Emma Brown, a new hire straight out of a prestigious business school. They would soon realize that Caroline had more power than they had anticipated when she decided to stop standing still and instead take control in a way they never saw coming. She had only been at Circle Industries for a few weeks, but she had already noticed something. The company's atmosphere was full of arrogance, especially from senior managers like David. Those at the top of the power ladder seemed to forget that there were people making equally important contributions below them. She stood quietly and observed from a distance. Emma couldn't help but notice Caroline Walker, the woman she frequently saw silently pushing her cleaning cart through the hallways. Unlike everyone else, Emma had noticed Caroline's movement throughout the building from the very beginning and had never considered her to be invisible. Caroline wore a faded red shirt and carried herself with humility, but she had a strange calmness and her keen eyes seemed to take in every little detail that others would easily overlook. Emma noticed that Caroline didn't seem like a typical cleaner. Underneath that facade, there seemed to be a secret intelligence and confidence that was just waiting to be revealed once, as they were walking down the hallway. For a brief moment, Emma felt as though Caroline knew everything that was going on in the company, both good and bad. Because of this, Emma couldn't stop observing Caroline whenever she was in her line of sight on the day that David Harris made his snide remark and everyone laughed at Caroline. Caroline's eyes gleamed with knowledge and insight that Emma couldn't mistake. As she watched Caroline continue working as if nothing had happened, Emma couldn't help but wonder how they could be so disrespectful to someone like that. It only stoked her curiosity because it seemed like Caroline had an inner strength that people like David completely ignored. Her composure, patience, and careful attention to every little detail led Emma to believe that Caroline was anything but a typical cleaner. They were so focused on their own power and the big decisions they thought were important that they forgot it was people like Caroline who kept this enormous machine running smoothly every day. Emma had heard that you could judge a person by how they treated those in lower positions, and in her opinion, David Harris and his colleagues had exposed their true nature. Their arrogance was evident in every word and sneering smile. Emma sensed that Caroline Walker wouldn't stay behind the scenes forever, and she wondered what Caroline was waiting for. When the truth finally came to light that day, Emma couldn't take her eyes off of Caroline, who was still quietly cleaning the boardroom. Caroline didn't say a word, but Emma felt that a change was coming and that a storm was brewing within Circle Industries, and Caroline Walker seemed to be at the center of it from the way she moved through the hallways and the way she quietly observed everything around her. Realized that beneath that serene exterior was a fantastic story that had yet to be told, a story that had the power to alter Circle Industries' entire dynamic and possibly the lives of all its employees, including her own sense of being on the precipice. Monumental Emma made the decision to keep a close eye on everything because she wanted to make sure she didn't miss anything important that was about to happen. Although the woman in the faded red shirt is Caroline Walker, Emma saw her as the key to the significant changes that were about to occur. The atmosphere at Circle Industries became more tense than ever that afternoon as workers hurried to finish their work in preparation for a crucial meeting. The annual review, where all of the company's senior leaders would present results and future strategies in front of tiers of executives. And they were positive that when the truth finally came to light, people like David Harris would no longer be laughing. Circle Industries CEO Robert Mason was a well-known businessman who was renowned for his firm and decisive management style. His presence not only astounded the employees but also improved the atmosphere of the company. More official and urgent for senior managers like David Harris and his colleagues, Mason had flown from Los Angeles to New York specifically for this meeting. It was the most crucial time of the year, and everyone was nervously getting ready, adjusting thick stacks of documents, organizing charts, and polishing business reports because they all knew that this meeting could decide their futures at Circle Industries. Caroline was still cleaning the large boardroom where the review was going to take place. She was still wearing her faded red shirt as usual and pushing her cleaning cart through the rows of chairs in preparation for the important meeting outside the room. The sound of directors' and managers' footsteps echoed outside the room, reflecting their nervousness and urgency. When the boardroom doors opened, Robert Mason entered with an air of confidence and power. He was wearing a luxurious gray suit that was expertly tailored, and his sharp eyes were scanning the room, inspecting every detail. With his hand resting on the large wooden table, Robert Mason stood in the middle of the boardroom, surveying the area and the people seated in front of him. Suddenly, though, his eyes paused in the corner of the room, where Caroline Walker was standing quietly, unlike the others, with her familiar cleaning supplies. Instead of ignoring Caroline, something unexpected occurred, and Robert Mason said, "Caroline," with a kind and perceptive smile. The whole room seemed to freeze for a second, so I think it's time. The senior directors, who had been filled with assurance after reading the reports on the table, now sat in disbelief, unable to comprehend what was going on. Murmurs started. David Harris, who had just hours before sneered at Caroline, was sitting frozen, his face tense, and the smug smile that usually adorned his face had disappeared. Not only David but everyone in the room was stunned, their eyes full of suspicion and curiosity as they turned toward Caroline, who slowly put down the rag she was holding. Her movements. When they arose, everyone wondered why the most powerful CEO in the company suddenly addressed the cleaning woman. Were purposeful, yet they exuded an odd assurance. From a modest cleaning lady, she appeared to wear a new aura of power that no one could have predicted when she raised her head for the first time without bowing down and walked to the center of the room in front of everyone. A huge wave was approaching Emma Brown, who was standing at the back of the room. Her heart raced as she recognized that this was not a coincidence. This was the moment Caroline had been waiting for, and she knew she was going to observe something very significant. Robert Mason said, "I would like to introduce you all to Circle Industries' main shareholder," after grinning and calmly glancing at each of the directors present. Caroline Walker. The room fell silent as if everyone's breath had been held, and then there were cries of surprise and wide, shocked faces. Nobody could believe what they had just heard. The company's largest shareholder, Caroline Walker, whom the senior directors and others had denigrated for so long, was actually the one with the most power. David Harris sat frozen, too shocked to talk, unable to move, his face pale, his eyes staring at Nancy as though she were a ghost from his past stalking him. He let go that everything he had ever believed about Caroline was utterly false. The room was filled with surprise as Caroline Walker, the once despised woman, stood there with pride and authority while the jeering laughter erupted. Caroline, the woman in the faded red shirt, was not merely a nameless cleaner. She was the one who held Circle Industries' destiny in her hands. Now the sneer of the past was gone. This was only the beginning. Caroline had risen and was prepared to make all the changes. Caroline Walker stood in front of all the Circle Industries senior directors, her face composed and powerful. The quiet woman, concealed behind her cleaning responsibilities, was now the center of attention, with everyone staring at her in shock and disbelief at what had just happened. The room was so quiet that nobody dared to move. They could still hear Robert Mason's words. The Circle Industries. That statement, made by principal shareholder Caroline Walker, completely altered the mood of the room and disproved everything they had previously believed. Caroline inhaled deeply before speaking in a tone that was composed but strong. For many years, Caroline said, looking around the room, "I've observed how you've managed this business. You may have assumed I was just an invisible cleaner, but I have actually been quietly observing everything that has been happening in the room. I have not only sat behind a desk in a fancy office, but I have also walked through every hallway and boardroom." David Harris, who had previously made fun of and denigrated Caroline, sat frozen, his eyes wide, his face as pale as a sheet. All the pride and cockiness that usually filled him had disappeared, replaced by fear and complete bewilderment. He couldn't believe that the woman he had always disregarded had such immense power. Caroline went on, her tone firm and focused. "I have observed how you treat the workers beneath you and how you value their commitment and diligence. You have only considered professionals and have overlooked the most crucial factor. You have established a poisonous culture where disrespect and conceit trump cooperation and respect, but that will change as of right now." As she spoke, every director felt the change in the atmosphere. No longer was she a woman with a mop and rag. Instead, she was a woman with actual power, and she had made the decision to use that power to completely transform Circle Industries. "I've been buying up pieces of this company little by little, and now I'm the majority shareholder of Circle Industries," she continued. "I will therefore be deciding how this business is run starting today." The directors started whispering, but none of them dared to object because they knew Caroline held their futures in her hands. A few became concerned not only because of Caroline's words, but also because they realized they had unknowingly denigrated and undervalued the most powerful person in the company. Standing in the back of the room, Emma Brown sensed the undercurrent of change. Her heart raced as she saw Caroline stand up and tell the truth. Emma realized that this was a historic moment for Circle Industries and all of its former employees. Caroline wasn't just any woman, she was the one who used things that others couldn't see to build the company's success. Nanae looked at Robert Mason, who was standing next to her in silence, and went on, "I've worked with Robert for a long time, and he's the only member of this leadership team who recognizes that a company's foundation isn't just its financial success but also the commitment and loyalty of its employees." Robert Mason grinned and nodded, indicating that I completely agreed with everything Caroline was saying. He wasn't just a strong CEO. He was also a visionary who had trusted Caroline from the start and collaborated with her to plan for this moment. Caroline looked around the room again, focusing this time on David Harris Mallon, who was seated motionless. She spoke slowly in a resolute and cold voice. "Do you recall what you said to me this morning, David? Do you recall the demeaning, condescending remarks you made about me while I was simply going about my work?" David was rendered speechless. His face was so pale that he dared not look Caroline in the eye, fully aware that what was about to happen would not be simple for him. Caroline took a position in front of David and spoke confidently and without mercy. The room erupted in whispers of shock and disbelief as soon as David Harris was fired. David sat in shock, unable to comprehend what had happened in a matter of seconds. His colleagues, whom he had once denigrated, now stared at him as everything he had worked so hard to build, his career, reputation, and power, vanished before his eyes. At him in disbelief, with no one daring to step in. "This is a wake-up call for all of you." Caroline Walker, the woman David and others once mocked, now stood taller than them all. She had not only shown that she had more power than anyone else in the room, but she also showed that kindness and respect were values that should never be undervalued. Caroline's voice rang out like a firm declaration. "If you don't change, if you don't start valuing people, this won't be the last firing." Caroline's warning lingered in the air for everyone to hear. Nobody could believe that the woman they had once looked down on, the one who had silently cleaned their meeting rooms and hallways for years, was now in charge of Circle Industries leadership. However, the changes that were to come wouldn't stop with David. Caroline Walker, the woman in the faded red shirt, was the one who made that change, and the room was completely silent after her declaration. Everyone's breath seemed to be held, and they all stared at Caroline with a mixture of respect and confusion. The dismissal of Harris, this was just the start. Caroline's voice reverberated through the room once more, calm but powerful. "This company will no longer be the same as it was. You've all been used to thinking only about profits and numbers on paper, forgetting about the people who actually run it. You've treated the employees beneath you as tools to achieve your goals, and you've treated them like you care." Caroline stood tall, her sharp eyes scanning every person in the room as if she could read their thoughts. Everyone felt an invisible pressure as their future at Circle Industries now depended on her. Them as if they were worthless, but that will no longer be tolerated. There were a lot of nervous looks in the room. Some people are starting to worry about their roles because they were used to controlling and exercising power without considering the feelings of their subordinates. Caroline went on to say, "I've seen this arrogance grow over the years. I've watched how you've treated the hard-working employees who have given their all for this company but have never received the respect they deserve. You've built a company where only those at the top are valued while everyone else is disregarded. But today that changes, and I will make sure it." Caroline was beginning a revolution that would completely change Circle Industries' culture, and they realized that if they didn't adapt, their future in the company would be uncertain. With each manager feeling the weight of her words, New York's eyes swept across the room once more. She was no longer the woman who was invisible. She was a true leader behind the cleaning cart, having quietly watched and comprehended every aspect of the business. "I'm not here to criticize you, but I am here to warn you that if you don't change, I will change you." David Harris was the first, "But if any of you keep acting in the same way, disparaging your employees and putting yourself before everything else, you will soon meet the same end as him." The room was so quiet that you could hear some people's heartbeats. They had been so accustomed to dominating others that they were now confronted with the consequences of their conceit. A few managers looked at each other as though they were attempting to figure out how to adapt to this new circumstance, but there were also people, like Greg Summers, whose concern was. Their expressions made it clear that they understood the culture Caroline was referring to was deeply embedded in Circle Industries' structure and had existed for many years, not just as a problem of the last few months. Because he understood more than anyone else that a company couldn't thrive based solely on financial figures but rather had to be built on mutual respect and the ability to fully utilize each person's potential. Robert Marinol, the CEO of the company, stood and watched the entire event. He knew that this moment had been in the making for a long time, and he fully trusted Caroline's leadership. Within the company, the managers in the room noticed that Robert nodded lightly, demonstrating his strong agreement and support for Caroline. They realized that this change wasn't just coming from Caroline, but also had the full support of their CEO, so there was no way out now. If they wanted to survive at Circle Industries, they had to accept the change. Caroline's voice softened but remained firm. In fact, I'm here to rebuild this company from the mistakes we've made, not to destroy it. It must become a place where every worker, regardless of rank, feels appreciated and respected. Nobody is merely a number or a shadow here. Starting today, everyone will have the opportunity to demonstrate their value. Emma Brown stood silently in the back of the room, her heart pounding as she heard New York's words. This was exactly what she had hoped for when she first joined Circle Industries. During her brief tenure there, she had witnessed the negative aspects of the company's culture, but now she was seeing a real revolution, and the woman in the faded red shirt was the one doing it. Caroline Walker was in charge of it. If you can't adjust, you can go. Tita Industries will not hesitate to part ways with those unwilling to change, Caroline stated firmly, looking around the room. This company will continue to exist, grow, and succeed, but it will do so on a foundation of respect and collaboration rather than arrogance and dictatorship. New York's words lingered in the air like a last warning to anyone who was still unsure, but they also presented a chance for those who were prepared to enter a new era for Circle to find renewal. After New York's powerful declarations, the boardroom of Circle Industries Maurice remained filled with tense silence as everyone sat frozen trying to understand what they had just heard. The old walls of power had started to crumble, and now Caroline Walker stood at the top leading the change that everyone would remember. The air remained thick with tension, and one thing was certain: the days of freely abusing power and disparaging others were over. Caroline stopped and looked at Asa. One of the company's long-serving senior managers, Greg Summers, was known for his conceit and willingness to do whatever it took to advance in his career. Greg had been quietly watching the entire conversation, but now his eyes showed a distinct look of concern because he knew he might be the next to go. Greg's actions, which were worse than David's, had made a lot of enemies in the company, and Caroline had undoubtedly noticed everything. Caroline approached Greg slowly, her gaze never leaving him. As everyone waited for her next move, the tension in the room increased. Greg sat stiffly, his hands shaking, but he made an effort to keep his composure, and his eyes showed his worry. "Ma'am Greg Summers," Caroline said, "do you know why I'm calling your name?" in a low, powerful voice. After a moment of silence, Greg stammered, "I don't understand, Caroline," as he stared at Caroline, trying to defend himself but failing to find the right words. "I've put in a lot of effort for this company over the years, so I don't understand why I'm in this role." Nanae's face remained stern and icy, her gaze unwavering. "Hard work. You believe stepping on others and disparaging those in positions of authority is a sign of hard work, and you don't respect those who have sacrificed everything for this company." Since he had grown accustomed to using his position of authority to control others, Greg realized that there was no way out of Caroline's remarks. However, this time, everyone in the room was watching him, aware that a significant change was about to occur, and Caroline persisted in denying Greg an opportunity to reply, saying, "You've disrespected your subordinates, established a poisonous workplace and believed that no one could stop you, but today, not just for David Harris but also for you, Greg Summers, that is no longer the case." The other directors couldn't believe what they were hearing, and some of them looked shocked, while others appeared relieved that the abusive powers were finally being held accountable. "You're fired, effective immediately." Greg sat motionless in his chair, his face white, his eyes wide with shock. He had always believed that his authority and decisions were unassailable, but now everything had fallen apart in an instant. Greg's hands trembled as he gripped the chair's armrest in an attempt to steady himself. "But I can change, Caroline, so give me a chance." His voice was stuttering with panic, and Caroline shook her head without showing any pity. "Your chances are over, Greg. You had plenty of chances to change, but you chose to ignore them all. Your actions have not only harmed other people, but they have also affected the entire workplace here at Circle Industries. There is no more room for people like you." Greg lowered his head, unable to speak, because he had built his reputation, power, and position in the. In the meantime, people around him gazed at him with a mixture of surprise and satisfaction that someone like Greg was finally being held responsible for the damage. The company had abruptly fallen apart. He was responsible for. Caroline turned to the rest of the boardroom, her eyes gleaming with resolve. "This is not only a lesson for David or Greg, but a warning to everyone present. The company's culture will shift. There will be no more space for conceit, demeaning others, or abusing authority. Instead, we will establish an environment where everyone, regardless of position, is respected and valued for their contributions." The room was still quiet, but the mood had changed. The conceit and entitlement of the previous directors had vanished, and even though some of them appeared concerned, they all believed that Caroline was acting appropriately. The invisible barriers of self-satisfaction that they had erected over the years had started to come down, and a new era for Circle Industries was about to start. I'm not here to destroy people, but I won't tolerate a disrespectful workplace. If you can adjust and change, there will be a place for you in this company's future. If not, you can find another way. Caroline glanced around the room again, her eyes resting on each face. A new wind of change had started to blow through Circle Industries, and Caroline Walker was the one guiding the ship. No one in the room dared to object because they knew that Caroline now had complete control and that they had to either leave or adjust to the new values she was bringing. Standing at the rear of the room, Emma Brown grinned a little because she had a lot of hope for the future, and this revolution wasn't. Caroline had demonstrated that true power didn't lie in external authority but rather in patience and determination to change things from the music roots. She wasn't only changing the company, she was also changing her own life. Caroline looked at Robert Mason, who had watched the entire event in silence. He nodded to her, his face displaying a smile of agreement that demonstrated his full support for everything they had planned. Nobody had anticipated Caroline Walker's actions. She had not only cleaned the office but also Circle Industries' entire culture. When she was done speaking, the room fell into a deep silence, and the director's eyes followed her with a mixture of surprise and caution. Greg Summers had been fired, and the fate of those who were left now depended on everything Caroline said. They knew that nothing would be the same again, and once again, the fear of who would be next was more evident than ever. Caroline walked to the center of the room, pausing to look at each of the once powerful directors, who now sat silently avoiding her gaze as if none of them wanted to meet her eyes. To possess Frozen, everyone realized that Caroline was no longer the cleaner they could readily rely on after the invisible walls of power they had constructed completely collapsed. I hope Caroline started off her speech calmly but sharply so that everyone in the room understood the message. Today, the culture you've created at Circle Industries, the culture of disrespect and power abuse, will no longer exist. She paused, observing the tension rising on the directors' faces. Overlook had become a formidable force. Some had begun looking at each other anxiously as they attempted to gauge the situation. Others quietly accepted that Caroline now had all the power, but you've forgotten that a company's core values aren't just reflected in its financial figures but also in how it treats its employees. Caroline went on to say that the janitors, secretaries, and anybody else you've denigrated are the backbone of the success you're experiencing. None of them are invisible. The directors appeared to start realizing that Caroline's words were more than just a warning. They were a profound reminder. Wasn't only attempting to discipline them, she was also attempting to rectify the company's long-standing errors and return it to the respect and human values that all organizations ought to uphold. Emma Brown felt a surge of admiration as she stood silently at the rear of the room. For Caroline, this was more than just a speech. It was a call for change and an opportunity for all employees to contribute to a better future. At that precise moment, Emma sensed that Circle Industries' future was changing, and she knew she wanted to be a part of it. Caroline took a moment to check that her message had stuck in everyone's minds by taking another look around the room. Caroline said, "I started from the bottom," and her voice grew softer but no less powerful. "I worked in the jobs you never paid attention to, and during that time I saw more than you may have imagined. You've forgotten that a company's success depends on everyone working together, not just the person at the top. This is your chance to join a new circle, a company where every employee is valued, not just on paper but in reality." The room remained silent as the directors realized they had to decide whether to stick to their old ways, with their haughtiness and disdain for others, or adopt the new culture Caroline was creating. Caroline was refusing to accept compromise or ambiguity any longer. Caroline turned to face Robert Mason, who had been watching in silence during the meeting. He had supported her during this process, and his kind smile now conveyed his unwavering encouragement. In addition to serving as Circle Industries CEO, Robert Mason was the driving force behind. Caroline said, her voice softening with warmth, "Thank you, Robert Caroline, for believing in me when no one else did, and because of that trust, we now have the chance to rebuild Circle the right way." The scenes showed Caroline quietly acquiring the company's shares and getting ready for this moment of change. Robert nodded, admiration for Caroline shining in his eyes. Trusting someone with your vision wasn't difficult. Caroline, you are the kind of leader Circle Industries needs. One who sees people as more important than numbers. Robert's remarks struck a chord akin to a public recognition of the handover of authority. Caroline had been formally appointed as Circle Industries' new leader, and she would usher in a new era for the business by upholding the principles she had always held dear. With her eyes on every face as though to make sure everyone had heard her message, Caroline took one final look around the room. "You can stay and be part of the change, or you can leave. The choice is yours," she said in a strong yet relaxed voice. "But Circle Industries will now be a place where everyone is respected regardless of rank. Decide to remain prepared for a time when our principles will come first." The walls of old power had collapsed, and Caroline Walker, the woman they had once ignored in her faded red shirt, was now guiding Circle Industries into a new future. Caroline turned and left the boardroom, leaving behind stunned and reflective eyes. Emma Brown silently trailed Caroline's intuition. An invigorated faith this was not merely a business transformation. It was a moment that would forever alter her life and the lives of everyone else. The principles Caroline had established, respect, cooperation, and patience, would now become Circle Industries' guiding principles. Emma hurried to catch up to Caroline in the hallway and then slowly said, "Thank you, Caroline, thank you for everything." Caroline turned to face Emma with a warm smile, saying, "You don't need to thank me, Emma. Just remember that you define your own worth." With a nod of appreciation, Emma acknowledged that she had just witnessed a momentous occasion for both the company and her own life. Caroline emerged from the building and gazed out over the expansive city of. She began at the bottom and now stands at the top of New York. However, it was not the wealth or the power that made her most proud, but rather the fact that she had demonstrated that the most crucial elements in any organization were perseverance, patience, and respect for others. Because of Caroline Walker, Circle Industries would never be the same. While the afternoon sun glinted off the skyscrapers as Caroline exited Jew Circle Industries, the expansive expanse of the New York sky seemed to have a special significance for her today. Caroline stopped for a moment, taking a deep breath of fresh air and feeling the transformation all around her. She had done something no one had anticipated, and not only had she changed Circle Industries from the inside out, but she had also changed her entire life from a forgotten cleaner to the head of one of the biggest companies in the sector. Emma Brown left the building after Caroline. With a heart full of respect and admiration, Emma gazed at Caroline with a fierce conviction that what she had just witnessed would permanently alter her life. Emma had not only learned how to manage a business, but also how to treat everyone with respect, regardless of their position. When Caroline noticed Emma coming, she grinned and asked, "Have you considered it?" Emma nodded, her eyes gleaming with resolve. "Yes, I want to stay and help you change Circle. I initially joined Circle because I think the values you're bringing to the company are great." Caroline gave the girl a supportive look, saying, "Emma, you have a bright future ahead of you. Although I'm happy you've chosen this route, keep in mind that it won't always be simple. There will be obstacles and people who oppose change, but if you stick to your principles, you'll succeed in everything." Inside the building, the events that had transpired in the boardroom continued to linger like a silent but potent wave, and the directors who had previously held control and power were now facing an unchangeable situation. Emma smiled, feeling greatly inspired by Caroline's words. She knew that change required time and patience, but Caroline had demonstrated to her that anyone, no matter where they started, could make a difference if they had enough determination and respect for themselves. Reality, they had to either adjust or depart. None of them would ever forget the day a woman they had once denigrated rose to become their leader on the streets of New York, and Caroline had started the process of reorganizing the entire business from its foundations. Emma and Caroline strolled alongside each other. Although New York's steps were slow, they were filled with confidence and resolve, and Emma's presence at her side was a testament to the change they would eventually bring about at Circle Industries. Caroline paused at a crossroads and gazed out at the throng of traffic and people hurrying down the streets. She reflected on the path she had traveled from the days of cleaning covertly and unnoticed to the moment she stood before the senior directors and announced her authority, claiming to have not only transformed her own life but also the lives of numerous others. She turned to Emma and said, "The most important thing, Emma, is never to let anyone underestimate your value. As long as we have the courage to believe in and utilize our individual strengths, we are all capable of doing so. Today is about everyone who has ever been despised, not just me, and together we will create a brighter future for Circle Industries." Emma nodded, taking in every word as if it were a priceless lesson. She understood that she was not only employed by a company, but also helping to achieve a great mission that would alter not only the organization's structure but also its respect and human values. Caroline took the lead. The city of New York, with its tall skyscrapers, was no longer only a representation of success and power, but also a place where anyone, no matter where they originated from, the ability to rise. New York knew that her journey wasn't finished and that many changes needed to be made, But today she demonstrated that true strength didn't lie in power but rather in patience, respect, and the capacity to bring about change from the smallest things. Circle Industries would no longer be a place of haughtiness and contempt. Instead, it would be a symbol of justice, respect, and the capacity to overcome any obstacle. It all began with a woman wearing a faded red shirt. Caroline and Emma continued to walk the busy streets with hope and determination, knowing that a new chapter of Circle Industries had begun and that thanks to the bravery and tenacity of individuals like Caroline Walker, the future would be better. That day, Circle Industries did more than just change. It would forever remember the story of Caroline Walker, the woman who was once underestimated but rose to take charge of everything. Thank you for following Caroline Walker's inspirational journey if you found. Thank you for your support and I hope to see you in the next video. This story is interesting and meaningful. Please hit like, share, and subscribe to ensure you don't miss any more motivational stories in the future.